Om no kaha samastaha suki no bhavantu. May all beings be happy and peaceful. Hey, how's it going, everybody? It's Phoenix here, and we are live today to talk about cryptocurrency. I'm going to review some charts for you all and give some updates on some trade setups that we mapped out on Monday. But first, I want to briefly mention my Small Cap Superstars report, which I just released, and you can read the introduction to it on my website. And I'm covering my top 10 small cap gems that have been holding up pretty well so far in this bear market. And some of them I'm really excited about. And so if you're interested in that, you should check that out on my website. I did all of the hard work for you so you wouldn't have to. And my trade size spreadsheet, I think this is a steal of a deal right now. And it's really helpful for making trades and sticking to a proper risk management protocol. For me personally, I just added a fair amount of, a good chunk of funds back into my trading account. And it was really helpful to just stick to the specific amounts that are given to me in my trade spreadsheet so that I'm not losing or making any more than I should be for a trade, if that makes sense. So let's see. Okay, I think we're live. Can somebody comment so that I know that we're live? It's saying that we're live. Okay, so we're going to talk about Bitcoin first. We're gonna review Bitcoin, Ethereum, and I'm also gonna look at BNB today, and maybe we'll look at Atom and Solana, and potentially some other alts on the radar here as well. But let's just look at Bitcoin first to see where we're at from a daily perspective. If you notice that we can identify a particular value area here, which is basically where the bulk of the price action has been. And that is, I would say, this area here. And it's been relatively boring for the last several weeks now. But the bulk of the price action has been between 17,200 and 16,400 or so. Okay, that's without the levels. But now there is a significant area that we seem to have come above here in the last couple of days, and I was expecting this to happen. We're going to throw the levels on now, and you can see from the daily, this area here, let me highlight this. This was a deviation from this mid here, which is a part of this larger range. Actually, there's a lot of lines here that's probably a little bit confusing for some of you on the daily perspective. I should probably separate these because some of these are weekly levels, some of these are quarterly levels, and you can see so the purple is weekly, the darker blue is quarterly, and then daily levels are usually in green or teal. So this daily level that I'm identifying here is at 16,600, and we get the deviation, and it got back inside of this after several attempts down. Now, we can't see so much information here on the daily, but on the 4H, we had that drop down into the demand zone on 2 occasions. So first it happened here, and we saw the strong wick. It dropped into this initial supply zone, actually went a little bit extended beyond it. And then the second time it made a repeat where it dropped down, but then was bought up again. And this candle, this hammer candle here, was actually a telltale sign of potentially more upside, which we have seen. And then we saw the inverted head and shoulders. I was mentioning this on Monday, and this was why I took a long at around 16,625 initially. Unfortunately, I got out of this a little bit too early, so I caught some of the move up, but I didn't catch all of the move. Now, it's been really tight. It's been really difficult to trade this because there hasn't been a whole lot of volatility. I mean, there has been, but it's been within a very tight range. So scalpers definitely have been doing better these last couple of weeks than a lot of swing traders such as myself. And so, but we did get the move up. We came in this range here, and you can see these lines aren't just arbitrary. So you can see it came all the way up to this level here, 16,770. Came slightly above and then dropped all the way back down and found some support here. And this was the retest. So this was the dirty retest and then pushed back up. And then we had that one long, that hourly candle that was actually happened over the course of maybe 15 or 20 minutes, pushed all the way back, broke into this range here. So we're stacking the ranges on top of one another. So this range, we had the initial range between 16,620 and then 16,770. And then we pushed straight up and into the mid of this range between 16,770 and 16,928. And this 16,928 is a more significant level in my humble opinion, because you can see that there's a clear blue sky above it, and you can see that this looks mighty appealing to smart money to fill this gap in here. There's a gap between around 1725 and 17,283. And so typically the first time we break into this, we get an initial rejection, which we did see here. And then the second attempt didn't push quite as far up into that yet. And there was a strong rejection there. So it may take some time to push back up, but I still believe that it's showing structurally that it wants to push back up again. So I think that, excuse me, I think that right now we're seeing, we've seen actually on the 4H, we've seen we're in our third 4H candle here, potentially another rejection at this range low. Personally, I'm not going to take a long here because I would be waiting for it to come down and maybe settle. Ideally, it will settle. It will start to calm down a little bit because there has been some volatility today. I think if it comes down here, starts to settle, and then we see a pattern develop and it breaks free and then starts to head back up again, then this would be my long trigger here. Otherwise, this is a no trade zone for me. Another potential long scenario would be, boy, this looks like a kindergartner was drawing this, but if it comes up here and then breaks above, and then we see a pattern develop here at above around 17K. So around 17K, this is going to be a critical area for Bitcoin to clear. If it clears that, then I'd be targeting all the way up to initially, I'd be targeting this weekly level around 17,150. And then from there, we're looking at this. This is a very obvious, it seems like these really obvious supply zones are where smart money is really targeting these lately. And I'm going to show that. I'll display that with BNB as well, so you can see what I'm talking about. But so this area here, price didn't spend all that long here, and then it dropped, and then it rejected here with BNB. But so usually this is what happens. We see these zones where price, it doesn't spend a long time, and then there's a major leg down. So it's the origin of the move down, and sometimes it's midway, it's mid move, right? So initially, this was more of an SR level here, and then this supply zone was formed. So we'll usually get that initial rejection, and they say that's because there were previous orders here that were not filled. Smart money was selling off here. So this would be a target. So around 17,400. If it can clear that, then we're looking all the way back up to 18K and beyond. And I do believe that ultimately Bitcoin can and will come back up there. The question is not if, but when. I think that once it does come back inside, again, this looks from a longer term perspective here. If we go to the daily here, you can see that this could turn into one big deviation, in which case it gets back inside. Initially, it did get back inside, but it was quickly rejected here. And we saw this picture perfect evening star formation leading to much more downside. This turned into a giant deviation, and we caught at least some of this move down here, came all the way back down here. But so if it comes up a second time to retest, this area, this 18K area, is going to be a very critical area for Bitcoin. And if it manages to hold here for some time and we don't get that quick rejection, then we can expect it to push up much higher. Okay. And so, because usually what happens when it reclaims a previous range, it pushes it at minimum to the mid. And the mid of this range is actually, I didn't identify this range here. I redrew this chart the other day, but you could call this sort of the high of this range, and this would be the low. And so the mid would be this quarterly level at around 21,470. So there's a lot of potential for Bitcoin to push up a lot higher if it can reclaim 18K first and then push back above with some strength, because I would, again, consider this a big deviation. Now, an example of this that is really interesting, we actually just saw this play out with Solana. And I was watching this, but I wasn't really eager to trade it. simply because Solana has been rather unpredictable lately. But this is, again, price is fractal, and these are happening on different time frames. But Solana, basically, these are two weekly levels here, between here and here. So this is 1480, and the lower portion of that was around 1093. And so Solana deviated below, got back inside, showed some strength. And then if we drop down and we look on the lower time frames, you can see that it actually did come back and retest here. So broke above with strength, momentum. That's what you want to see initially. But then there was that rejection, so I wouldn't have longed this here. Wasn't paying too close attention, but did come back, retest on the 4H, and then you see the momentum candle here. Okay, so I wasn't wanting to long this just because there's been a lot of drama around Solana, but you can see what happened next. It pushed all the way up past the mid, and it almost came all the way back up to the top of this weekly range, and now it's currently retesting this mid, so it may make another push back up. It would not surprise me if it pushed all the way up to 1483. But I'm not, as far as like my risk tolerance, I'm not willing to take a long here at this position, only because we've seen Solana, I think it was up 18 or 19% yesterday. I don't, in this type of market condition, if it was a bull market, it would be different. But in these market conditions, I'm not eager to long something that just had a big, kind of a parabolic move, relatively speaking, compared to everything else that's out there right now. So, but Solana is a perfect example of, we get the deviation and then it comes back, it manages to break back inside, higher probability that it's going to push up at minimum to the mid and most likely up to the top of the range. Is that making sense to all of you? Is anybody paying attention? It's kind of weird doing lives because you don't always know if there's anybody. I guess I can see there's some of you watching concurrently. Quiet group today. So Ethereum, it's not clear to me. There's not as much clarity with Ethereum, and I was actually surprised to see Ethereum. If you look on the ETH-BTC chart, it had a very strong push up today. And we may actually see more upside for Ethereum after today. If it can clear, I don't really rely as much on the technicals for ETH-BTC. I do have these ranges drawn. We are above the mid in this larger range here between these two monthly levels. And then we have the quarterly and the 2021 high here. So it could push up strong again. Ethereum, it's a little bit concerning to me, and I did long some alts earlier this morning, which I exited because they weren't really doing what I wanted them to do. Ethereum hasn't really corrected yet after this move yesterday, and it may hold here. It may hold. This is actually a critical level, and I'll show you in a moment here, but we had a pretty strong move for Ethereum and stronger than Bitcoin. You can see Ethereum's up over 3% right now. Bitcoin's only 0.9%. But this mid is, where's the price at right now? We're currently at 1252, and this is the mid between this monthly level here and this monthly level here. Okay, so which month are we looking at? We're looking at last month. Yeah, so it's the mid right smack in the middle between last month's range. Okay, so and it seems to be holding so far. That's a very large momentum candle there, but it's it's been pretty wavy gravy and not as clear as Bitcoin. And so I haven't been really focused on trading Ethereum. And I really wouldn't be interested in Ethereum personally until I saw it actually clear this 1310 level here. But Ethereum, likewise, very similar to Bitcoin, similar story as far as this thin move here. Most likely, if it shows continued strength, it's going to want to get filled, and that's between 1350 and 1425, 1430-ish, okay? I wouldn't be surprised to see this happen. I think at some point it's inevitable. And it seems like sooner than later, that would just be the most obvious move, starting out the new year with a strong move to the upside. And actually, I did go back and look, and I think that the last 2 years we had a bullish impulse to kick off the new year. It's 2 out of the last 3 years. I'm not sure if it was the last 2, but you'll have to go back and check for yourself. But 2 out of the last 3 years we had that. So BNB had a nice move yesterday, and I was actually charting out the move, and then it happened exactly as I charted it. But I was planning to take a long here, but then I realized I actually did take a long, and I didn't see the supply zone that was here. I wasn't paying close enough attention, but there is a supply zone for BNB, and it literally wicked right up into it. So that was very concerning to me, and that's why I got out of this. And I actually have a small scalp short that's open right now on this. But BNB also huge move yesterday. I mean, after just weeks of nothing, a big nothing sandwich for BNB, and then all of a sudden, out of the blue, we see this move. These 2 1-hour candles, it went up over 5%, which is actually pretty big for BNB, considering we didn't have a candle this large in, how long was this? It got pretty boring there for a while. That was what, almost 3 weeks there. So, and actually that move, again, it happened, these are 15-minute candles. So this happened in 45 minutes. And this candle in particular, very strong. Usually you see a candle like this, and it's indicative of more upside eventually, unless it's moved straight. I mean, this was a Mariposa candle. It went straight in one direction. And we did see more upside, but then you see what's happening here. So I would be reluctant to take a long on BNB unless, now if BNB comes and it rages back above here and starts to consolidate above 263.6, starts to really consolidate, and then I'd be looking to take a long, because where are we at in the larger range here? Let's look at this on the daily, and you can see that there is a weekly range here between 207.6 and 337.3, and we haven't hit the mid yet. But if it gets above this, you notice here, this supply zone also coincides with previous support levels, okay? And that's on multiple occasions. So this is actually rather intentional, so that the support, it turned into a supply zone. And that's usually how these things play out. There was the deviation here, but this is going to initially create some strong pressure to the downside. I would be surprised if BNB didn't correct it at minimum back down to 253.7. So if I had a long here, if I had long this somewhere down here, which it's hard to see this playing out, you would have had to have been paying very close attention. And if you'd have seen this 15-minute candle, then it would have been an obvious long from here. But as we know, this is why alerts can be really beneficial, because, a lot of the times you're not able to watch the charts like a hawk. Even if you are a day trader and you're constantly glued to the charts, you're not able to look at them all the time. So, but if you'd have set an alert, this would have been an obvious place to have an alert as well, because we're wanting it to clear this range. But then again, sometimes we have that strong 15-minute candle, and then we come in and immediately come back down again. But in this case, what was different about this move? Well, if you look at all of these 15-minute candles, look at how small these are. Look at how, this was the largest candle by far in this entire range. And so the chances of it coming back are slim to none, because once that levee breaks, once we get that spring move, it's like all that pressure has been released, and it's likely going to continue for some time. And that's exactly what happened over the next two candles. So there are some occasions where I will trade breakouts, and this would be one of them. Most of the time I'm waiting to see, I'm waiting patiently. I'm doing my best to wait for a retest, and I don't always succeed at that, but usually I wait for the retest before making the entry. But in this case, this would be an exception. Sometimes that's the way it goes. It just runs away without you and doesn't come back. And that's how it was with BNB. But so a lot of people getting FOMO here, a lot of people FOMOing in up here. And I know I took an initial long down here, probably exited a little too soon, but that's the way it goes sometimes. So Atom has been very strong as well. I was surprised the other day because looking at a lot of the alts and seeing a lot of upward movement and a clean structure, where Bitcoin was still kind of, blasé, wasn't really doing a whole lot. And that sometimes can be a sign that there will be a big strong move for Bitcoin that's imminent. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes though, we get the pump in the alts right before Bitcoin crashes. So usually, I mean, it obviously is going to preface a big strong move for Bitcoin, but we don't always know which direction it is. And so you can't, for me personally, I don't trade one coin or token based on another's movements. But I will use it sometimes as confluence to give me some sort of confirmation. But so Atom has actually been very, very strong. But is this a head and shoulders here? Let's see if that looks the same. Yeah, I mean, it looks like it could be a head and shoulders, but now we're looking at, well, is this in an area that of interest to us? It hasn't come up to this weekly level yet, so it's not quite there yet. But if it was up in this zone here between 1050 and like 1070, 1080 or so, then I would be looking at this much more closely to watch for the breakdown of the head and shoulders. Now, let me just put this out there, because I know a lot of people just wait for the breakdown of the head and shoulders and immediately trade this. But this is where you have to be constantly on point with your game, because once you get the breakdown, this is the normal trigger, and this is what you see in all of the diagrams in online when you see all the patterns. But this is actually not the optimal entry. The optimal entry is what usually happens is that it will break down, but then it will come back up and we'll get almost another shoulder that forms on the dirty retest, and then it breaks down. And so the optimal entry is actually after the next shoulder forms. That's usually what happens a lot of the times. Because why are they doing this? They're running the stops on everybody that entered here and put their stop loss just above the neckline. Okay. And so that's kind of, if you see something online or in a book and it shows you an entry and you see that, and it's very common across many different platforms, then most likely that's not what smart money is going to be doing. They're going to be finding a way to grab the liquidity from the retail investors that are following those patterns. And so that's just one example. And the reason I mention this is because the head and shoulders is actually a very common pattern that can be reliable if you trade it properly. At least that's been my own experience. Double tops, triple tops, and head and shoulders, I rely on those patterns more than any of the other patterns. I don't really, I don't give as much to the diagonal patterns like the triangles, the wedges, and all of that, although I do pay attention when I see them. But again, also, these are based off of horizontal lines. And so horizontal lines, as I've shared in my course videos, they're much more important, more significant than diagonals to me. So for instance, if just because Atom breaks this is very subjective where I draw this line. I'm connecting these three wicks here. It broke down below. Now, is this a trigger to go short? No, not necessarily. because again, it's very subjective, but this is much more objective. This level here, this neckline that we see, this swing low, is much more objective. So the breakdown here would be stronger, but I'm not necessarily going to short this immediately just because it breaks down below here, okay? Because maybe it finds support here and then it pushes back up higher. But if this was up higher, if it was in this area here, then I'd be looking to short this. But I'm not convinced that ATOM has seen the end of its run because of what's preceding it, because of the macro context, because Bitcoin, I think, is probably going to end up pushing higher. So ATOM, how would I trade this currently? I'm not looking to long here. I'm not looking to short here, but I would be interested if it got up to this weekly level and started to find support and started to blast off from there. Okay, so that's at around 10. The weekly level is 1057, and then the clearance would be above any sort of a range that forms above that. Okay, and then we're looking at much higher targets for ATOM, and probably initially around $11, and then from there I'd be targeting up around $12. So I think that ATOM has more room to run, and this range has been in effect for many weeks now. So ATOM, one of the stronger altcoins of this bear market, and I think it'd be good to keep this one on the radar. I'm personally, I don't know that I would be accumulating spot with ATOM because I like riskier plays in general that I feel like are going to have more upside. But ATOM is definitely holding steady here. Also, if you zoom out, you notice this weekly level, it's going to take a lot for it to clear this, just because this is basically the neckline of a Head and Shoulders here. You could say this is a double top. You could say this, I mean, whatever pattern it is, it's a significant pattern. You can see this, all of this here was previous support. And now the question is, will it flip back again into support? It's going to take a strong move from Bitcoin for it to break above that. So I think I would probably lean toward the short side unless Bitcoin is up around 18K once ATOM does get back up here. So you have to take it all in context and see what's going on with Bitcoin and what's going on with Ethereum. Again, Ethereum is concerning to me only because it hasn't really pulled back strongly yet. I would expect it to at minimum pull back to maybe 1225 or so before trying to make another push up. And when that happens, that means that a lot of the other alts are going to come down as well. So I'd be on the lookout for that. Now, so we've covered Solana. I'm not interested in this, but I would be interested in maybe shorting this up at around 1481. Have we covered Lido was one that was curious because it was making some strong, wow, it's up 14% again today. I don't know what's going on with Lido, but I mean, maybe some of you have been following this and you understand that maybe there's some news. There's got to be something, some fundamental shift that's happened here, because I think yesterday it was another 15 to 20% move to the upside, and there was a question about shorting it, and I said, well, I wouldn't short this. Here was sort of, it's nice when you get that horizontal, that range that forms around a key area. And that's why with price action trading, we identify the key areas first, and then I'm not interested unless it hits one of my levels. Okay. And it's not precise, even though I have the lines here, it's not precise. It's a zone around that area, in which we saw here with Lido, but Lido didn't show any signs of breaking down. And you see that it dipped below very temporarily, but then it was bought up and it got back inside. And again, so you could say this was a deviation from this range here, and then likely going to push up higher at minimum to the top, which it did. And then it pushed up even stronger up higher. And, you know, altcoins, I would not. Okay, so as we get into 2023, shorting altcoins is not a priority for me. Okay, it's not something that I'm very wary, because we know that the books are thin. We know that there's not a lot of liquidity, and I have seen before where months of downside has been washed out by a single weekly candle. And actually, if we look at Lido, notice what just happened here. This is on a weekly time frame. Okay, so And actually, let's look at this. So we have the last 2 months here. Well, we obviously wiped away already, and that was a big red candle here, but several months almost of downward sell pressure has been completely reversed in a matter of not a week, actually a couple of days. And so that can happen with a lot of these altcoins that have been just sort of slowly bleeding out. And like I said, just like with BNB, that pressure, near is up 16% today. I have no clue why. I have no idea. I don't know if there's any reason for it, but near was up yesterday. Near made a similar move. And look at what near was doing before that. It was slowly bleeding out. It was range bound. But then again, another example of where you set an alert up. If you'd have set an alert around 137 and you'd have caught this happened in a 15-minute candle. I'm sure of it. Notice here was the first. It wasn't a massive candle, but it was bigger than a lot of the candles that preceded it. And then the second candle, and then the slight pullback. Here was your entry. And then from there, we still could have caught a massive move up here. See, this is where I wasn't paying attention to near, but it went up 14.5% from the proper entry, you could say, after the breakout, because it broke out above this area here. Okay, so Matic, come on, Matic. Let's see what you got here. I was looking at this one yesterday and not really super interested in Matic right now. It's been this, let me clear this. Okay, so we have these monthly levels here between 75 and $1.02, and it actually just kicked off the bottom of this monthly range. And if we look, so we're still in the lower quarter of that quadrant there. And so I'm not really interested in longing Matic, again, because I think Ethereum needs to pull back first. But if Ethereum pulls back and then we see Matic pull back to around 78 cents, then at that point, if it shows some strength, then I would reconsider. But again, and also, or if it did something like, if it cleared, let me mark this out here, because there is, actually mark it here. So there's this range here. I'm going to just mark this as a value area where most of this price action is happening. And you can see resistance. Can this flip into support? So we have two areas of interest. One is if it comes back down to 7.786 and then consolidates, breaks back up, okay? And then targeting the mid of this and then the upper boundary. So the mid would be around not much higher than it is right now, around 0.8047, and then the top of the range is 0.8216. Now the second scenario is if it just continues to push up, which I think is less probable, but if it does push back up, gets above this 0.82, and then from here it starts to push up, because then you have, well, we do have a supply zone right here we have to pay attention to this. So I'd probably be targeting somewhere up here, which is around, in the middle of that would be around 85 cents for Matic. Okay, so that's if it can clear this, and that's going to take for Bitcoin probably to show some continued strength here, and Ethereum. Right now, we're not seeing a whole lot. It seems to be settling. So I think it's going to probably settle in over the next maybe 12 to 18 hours before we see any sort of big push back up again. Now, this is also coinciding with this range-bound environment for the S&P 500. And so the S&P really hasn't made up its mind yet whether it wants to go up or down. I think, there's no way for me to know for sure. So I'm not gonna speculate on this, because I can't say that there's the stronger probability is that it's gonna want to head down, only because we just had this pattern here and we saw the third touch of this diagonal and we saw it came up to the mid, rejected here, and it broke down. And so, but now it's consolidating again. So it's possible that this range is gonna hold, and it's possible that the bottom is in for the S&P 500 at 3,500. I still feel like it's going to go lower, but I don't have any sort of evidence to support that yet. So if that's the case, then we could be close to the bottom for Bitcoin as well. And so again, the question of have we seen the bottom for Bitcoin? I'm not really sure yet. I think that we're probably going to see one more washout at some point before we start to accumulate in earnest. But we'll know that we're in accumulation because the price action is going to get incredibly boring. And right now, the last week or two, it's been really boring. But then we've also been in holiday. So we'll see. We'll see. But this, as long as this remains range bound, Bitcoin's probably going to do something similar here. You know, I'm not expecting any fantastic moves yet, even though it seems like, well, we just had one. It wasn't really, because this is a pretty tight range here. It seems like when you're zoomed in, it seems like much more than it is, but it's not much going on just yet. So we'll see what happens tomorrow and into the end of the week. But so far, I'm still biased toward the long side. I still feel like we have more room to move up, but I want to see a little bit deeper pullback before making an entry. Now, Bitcoin, I don't know if it's going to give me that because it keeps rejecting off of this. But no, I still think it's going to head back down to maybe 16,770 or so, and that's where I'm looking at. I'm focusing in on the lower time frames, and I'm looking to see if there's a pattern that forms. I'm looking to see for pin bars, bullish engulfing candles. I'm looking to see what's happening with other charts that coincide with Bitcoin. So I hope that you found this video helpful. I'm going to save some of my voice because I want to make another video today. I want to make a video about manifesting money, but some interesting points on that, because a lot of people get it confused. I know that I myself have to remind myself certain things about not forcing things in particular when it comes to making money, because, and especially helpful for traders when we start to force trades, which I'm definitely guilty of on multiple occasions in just the last couple of weeks. We start to force things, that's when we start to lose money. And we start to try to force things to happen a certain way in particular, instead of just letting it be revealed and letting it come to you. And that's, you know, so many beautiful lessons with trading, and that's where we're at right now, just really just letting things come to us. Now, you can see that Bitcoin did reject pretty strong at the top of this. Why do I not have this marked? Well, I had it marked. It rejected pretty strong up here, which is basically the top of this range. Makes sense, right? That was the initial rejection, but then it doesn't mean that it's not going to push back up again. As we saw here, this looked like a little mini distribution, and then it rejected, but then it retested before coming up higher. Okay, so maybe we come down lower here and consolidate. That's what I want to see before positioning myself long. So again, I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you have anything you'd like to share, you have any requests for charts, I did my best to share the levels, because I know some of you are commenting that you don't, you're just listening from your car. So I hope that you found this helpful, and always open to your feedback. And thank you so much for supporting my work and tuning in. And yeah, if you watch this far, give me a like, give me a comment. Have a beautiful rest of your day.